विवेकानंद सूरये सच्चित् सुख स्वरूपाय स्वामिने तापहारिणे. A ghost in the house of God. I hope you understood what is the house of God that I was referring to, and who is the ghost. A disciple went to a guru and asked him, "Sir, I want God." The guru replied, "Remove I and want. You are God. I want God. Remove I and remove want. You are God. You are already God. So this body, which is the temple of God, is inhabited by a ghost. A ghost has sneaked into the house of God. Now all our struggle is to get rid of the ghost, to exorcise. What is the source of pain for us? You just tell me. Everybody says, I am suffering. But they don't know what is that I they are referring to. I am suffering. What do you mean by that I? Body cannot suffer on its own, because body is just a physical entity. If you analyze, our Rishis have told, our scriptures keep telling, this I is only a myth. It doesn't really exist. It is a sham, it is pseudo, it is fictitious, it is unreal. We have discussed this. Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa gives the example of onion. You peel on, keep it on. You keep all the layers, peel off all the layers, and the onion is not there. There is nothing like that except layers. Similarly, when you analyze what is this I, you go deep into your own being, you will find that there is no such thing as I. It doesn't really exist. You exist as your true self, which is actually the truth. But the most difficult thing is to turn inward and to look into our own selves. That is the biggest problem for the world. We want to know everything about the universe, but we don't want to know anything about ourselves. Who am I? I suffer. What do you mean by that I? No, I don't know. If you don't know, you just inquire into it. You'll find out who you are. What does it I refers to? No. You know that story of Parashurama and Samvartana. It's not there in books, it's just there as a legend. Okay? You will not find in the scripture. Samvartana you will come across. In Tripura Rahasya you find him also in Mahabharata, a great sage. And also Parashurama we all know. Parashurama, to take revenge because his father had been killed by Kartaviryaarjuna's sons, he wanted to take revenge. So he went about killing the kings all across the Bharatavarsha. 21 times he searched for every king from the nook and corner, and then he extirpated them. That was the kind of revenge he had practiced. And afterwards he felt remorse for all the battles he had fought and for all the bloodshed that he had created. And he felt like doing tapas. He was on his way to Mahendra mountain. And he was seeking for a guru. On the way, he met with this Samvartana. He was an Avaduta. He was just lying there in the forest with a dust-smeared body, disheveled hair, unclothed. He was just there, naked. So he was just lying on the path, and Parashurama was going. And then Parashurama asked him, "Who are you?" So he just wanted him to give way to him because he was on the path. Because once you become an Avaduta, you don't know which is path, which is this, which is right, which is left, which is north, which is east, which is west, which is south. They just go in whichever direction they feel like going. Unconditioned beings means they are transcendent the mind, they become the absolute. The whole universe becomes theirs. So they don't have a volition of their own. Volition of their own means they don't will, because their will becomes the will of the Lord, because they have become the absolute. This I want, this I don't want, this is mine, this is not mine. This I need to avoid, this I need to embrace, I need to possess. No such desire will be there with them. So Samvartana, he was such a great sage. And he did not reply in the beginning. When Parashurama became a little more haughty and said, "Who are you? Please make way for me." Then Samvartana looks at him and says to Parashurama, "You asked me a foolish question. Okay. If I ask you the same question, what is your reply? Who are you? Tell me first," Samvartana says. Parashurama was annoyed a bit. This man doesn't know who I am. I am Parashurama, who had killed all the Kshatriyas. No Kshatriya could stand in front of me. And such a person like me, he is asking, "Who are you?" This man, after all, okay, a non-entity in the forest, a kind of beggar, he is asking me, "Who are you?" Then Parashurama said, "I am Parashurama." A kind of, "Don't you know who I am? I am so famous because every king trembles if he listens my name." Okay, it was my accomplishment kind of thing. So Samvartana looked at him when Parashurama said, "I am Parashurama." Samvartana said, "Did I ask your name?" "I asked you, who are you? And you say, I am Parashurama. Did I ask your name?" "I did not ask your name. If I want to know you as Parashurama, a name, I would have asked you, what is your name? I asked you, who are you? The question that you put to me." And then Parashurama says, "I am Parashurama." Again he insists that, "You tell me then who you are." And Parashurama says, "I am Jamadagni's son." "Did I ask you whose son you are? I asked you who you are." Then he said, "Tell me who you are first. You have asked me the question." So Parashurama was perplexed. So he just went on telling that, "I killed because somebody had killed my father and I wanted to take revenge. I went about here and there and killing." "Did I ask you what you have accomplished, what you have done? I'm asking you a simple question. Who are you? The question that you have put to me." So Parashurama had no answer for this. A question for which you don't have an answer. You are asking me, who are you? Then Samvartana says, "Okay. When you say I, okay, when you say I, what do you mean by that, Parashurama? What does that sound Parashurama refer to? What does that refer to? If that refers to this physical body in front of me, when you say Parashurama, that word Parashurama refers to the physical body that you are standing in front of me. You are a physical body, okay? What that Parashurama means? If I am a physical body, you must tell. So if you are a physical body, I am also a physical body. Then why did you ask me, who are you? You are a physical body, I am a physical body. There ends the question. Then why should you ask me, who are you? No. When you say, I am Parashurama, you don't mean the physical body that is in front of me, but the psychological body that is within me. That is within you. Okay? You don't mean the body, you mean the mind. When you say I am Parashurama, you don't mean the physical body. You are a little enlightened. You are an intelligent man because you concentrate more on your intellect, you concentrate more on your buddhi. Okay? People, some of the people who are very intellectually oriented, they don't even care to take care of the body well. Okay, sometimes they even forget to eat food. Scientists also sometimes in laboratory, they are doing an exploration, they are doing an research. Sometimes they get possessed with, they get preoccupied with the thing that they like so much that they don't even pay attention to the physical body. It happens or not? It happens. They don't even forget to eat food. forget to take bath, forget to put on the good clothes also. So they are so embraced, deeply engaged in one particular action, and they like it. And so they don't pay much attention to the body. And such people, you can say that they dwell more on the intellect, more on the thoughts. So, if you mean when you say I am Parashurama, the mind, you are a very knowledgeable human being, you cultivate intellect, you want to identify more with the knowledge that you have, not with the physical body. Okay? As physical body, I am not important, but as buddhi, as intellect, I am important. My mind is very important for me. My mind is full of knowledge. I am a storehouse of knowledge. I have read so many books, I have acquired so much of knowledge. And so I identify with the knowledge that I possess, not with the physical body as such. Physical body is just flesh and bones. I don't care. It's not that important for me. So when you say I am Parashurama, and you mean the intellect that you possess, or the buddhi that you have, the knowledge that you have, then you have a mind and I have a mind. I may not be on par with you in terms of knowledge, but I too have got a mind. I have some knowledge, you have some knowledge, maybe you have more knowledge. You are a mind and I am a mind, you are an intellect, I am an intellect. So again your question, who are you, is foolish. If you mean the mind, you have a mind and I have a mind. Why did the question, who are you? Then Samvartana says, okay, you may not be the intellect, you are an enlightened being. You are a jnani. You are an enlightened person. You have attained freedom, you have attained mukti. I suppose, if you are of that being, a being who has attained self-enlightenment, then everything it is consciousness. You are a piece of consciousness, I am a piece of consciousness, the whole universe is consciousness, the whole universe is God. Where is the distinction? Then why did this question arise in your mind? Who are you? What you are? I am also that. You are consciousness, I am consciousness. Where is the distinction in consciousness? There is distinction in physical body. You have one kind of body, I have one kind of body. Okay? If you identify with the physical body, that's one type of physical body, this is another type of physical body. That is one type of mind, this is one type of mind. Okay, in every way, your question is foolish, meaningless. If you identify with the body also, you have a physical body, I have a physical body. If you identify with the intellect, you have one kind of intellect, I have one kind of intellect. If you know that you are the soul, you are consciousness, there is no distinction in consciousness. Consciousness is everywhere the same. A man who has attained consciousness should not ask this question, who are you? Because what is you? The same thing I am. So then Parashurama's head started reeling. This man is not an ordinary guy. He understood. This man is full of knowledge, seems to be a man of enlightenment. Parashurama was seeking a guru. He wanted to know himself. He wanted to know the truth. Then he falls at his feet and Samvartana asks for enlightenment, asks for proper guidance, asks him to accept him as a disciple. But Samvartana says, I am not your guru. Okay? He has given some instruction. Parashurama did not absorb it because he was full of rajas. He had just now fought the battle, right? Mighty battles he fought. Sanguinary battles. Full of blood. He spilled so much of blood of kings. So the rajas has not sublimated yet. So Samvartana had given him some spiritual instruction, but he did not understand all of that. Parashurama asked him, please repeat what you have said to me. I did not grasp what all you have said. Then Samvartana says, he did not want to repeat his counsel again. He says, I am not your guru. You go to Dattatreya. He will enlighten you. So upon the instruction of Samvartana, Parashurama goes to Dattatreya. And the conversation between Parashurama and Dattatreya comes to us as Tripura Rahasya. There is a book by name Tripura Rahasya, which is a conversation between Parashurama and Dattatreya. And there the great sage Dattatreya enlightens Parashurama as to what consciousness is. About Chit. The word used there for consciousness is Chit, God. This is spirit, all-pervading spirit. God actually has consciousness, God has Chit, God has all-pervading spirit. So he is there everywhere. From him actually the whole universe has come into existence. So same Upanishad philosophy in the form of a conversation, beautiful conversation between Dattatreya and Parashurama. So, we find another kind of discussion, another kind of debate in Buddhist theology also. You all might have heard the name of Nagasena, a Buddhist theologian, scholar and philosopher. There was a king by name Menander, also known as Milinda. There is a conversation between Nagasena and Milinda, it's Milinda Panha. Okay, beautiful conversation. The Buddhist monks also, not just if a new novice joins, actually, they don't just ask the novice to meditate. The novice is supposed to have an intellectual grasp of the Buddhist theology, an intellectual understanding. Before you embark on spiritual practice, before you embark on sadhana, you must have intellectual clarity as to what for you are embarking on sadhana and as to the ultimate goal or objective of your spiritual practice. What for you are doing practice? Okay, I want to meditate, I am meditating. What for you are meditating? What you will attain through meditation? What is the objective of meditation? What do you want to attain? That clarity must be there. So a deep insight into the practice and also into the objective of practice. So novices are expected to read Buddhist theology and have an intellectual grasp before they proceed with the sadhana, the meditation. So the Milinda, he was actually ruling that Bactria, a great king, a philosopher king. He also had these questions: what is life? What is the ultimate destination of life? Where the individual goes, where the jiva goes, what is death? He had many questions. He was in fact looking for a philosopher who would enlighten him on these matters. So he heard about this Nagasena, Buddhist theologian, and then actually he approaches Nagasena. So he approaches Nagasena and he said, I have some questions and I want to ask you. I heard you are a well-read man and you have a lot of clarity on philosophical things. Spiritual. So the first question that Milinda asked is, what is your name? And how you are known as? He says, I am Nagasena. He did not ask, who are you? He just asked, what is your name? How you are known? He said, I am known as Nagasena. But then Nagasena says, this word Nagasena is only a denomination, it's an epithet. It's only a denomination, it's an epithet. It has no significance of its own. It is insubstantial, this name. Don't take it seriously. People call me by Nagasena. I am known by Nagasena, but it's only a denomination, insubstantial. So there is nothing like Nagasena. He says, no, there is no individuality like Nagasena. What he meant to say is, then Milinda, he was a bit perplexed. Then he asked, then who is teaching whom? You are guru, you are a preceptor, novices, monks, new monks come to you with questions, and people like me come to you, and we ask questions, you answer. If there is no person like Nagasena, then who is answering the questions of whom? If there is no teacher-disciple relationship, okay? You say that there is no teacher-disciple relationship, you say there is no person like Nagasena, then where is good? Who is doing good and who is doing bad? If this individuality is a myth, if this Nagasena is a myth, then again Nagasena says, this is only a denominational purpose, it has no existence of its own. So this Nagasena individuality is a myth. Again Nagasena insists on saying that. Then Milinda says, if somebody had killed Nagasena then there would be no murderer. Is that okay? You say that there is no entity like Nagasena. If somebody had killed Nagasena, somebody were to murder you, then there would not be any murderer then. Because Nagasena is a non-entity. You say there is no person like Nagasena, no individuality. Yes, Nagasena says this individuality of Nagasena is a myth, there is nothing like Nagasena. Then Milinda says, explain it to me, I don't really get it clearly. And he says, then this hair is Nagasena? There is no individuality in you, if individuality is a myth. Is it hair Nagasena? No. Then he says, is the nails Nagasena? No. Then is this body part, that body part he asks ultimately, the aggregate of parts Nagasena? No, he says. Milinda, actually. Then you explain it clearly. I don't get it, what you mean. When you say that there is no individuality like Nagasena, this Nagasena is only a denomination, it's only a myth. It is only for convention purposes, right? See, we don't come with a name when we are born. After we are born, we are given a name. Then that becomes very important for us. Okay? We don't come into the world with a name. We just come as an aggregate of parts, bodily parts, and with a psychological structure. After you are born into the world, you are given a name, but that name becomes very important afterwards. You are not brought it into the world when we come, when we are born, but are subsequently given, but that becomes so important. When somebody calls you with that name, you respond. Somebody praises that name, you become fat. If somebody criticizes that name, you become contracted. That becomes so important afterwards. It's only a fictitious thing, but it plays a very, very major role. It's the ghost. That's why today's topic is a ghost in the house of God. So this name is playing so much of mischief. You just imagine, none of us has any name. Nobody here has any name. Okay. What is the problem then? There will be some problem in conducting the affairs of the mundane world. Okay. Problem only in conducting the affairs of mundane world. But philosophically speaking, spiritually speaking, no problem. There is no need for us to have any name. Okay? You are a piece of life, I am a piece of life, that is one physical body, this is one physical body. Right? We can just conduct. You can just X, Y, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, up to Z you can have. Now you can have some other. Or you can give a number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But that is also kind of name only. Because if suppose you are given the number 2, as soon as say that 2 is a great man, you will become fat. Okay? It doesn't matter. Some identity you have taken up, but you have forgotten that it is a fictitious thing. You have forgotten that this is a fictitious thing. Then Nagasena asked Milinda, how have you come here? Have you come on foot or have you come by your chariot? Then Milinda says, I have come by my chariot. So then tell me, is this wheel the chariot? Nagasena points out to the wheel of the chariot and asks him, what is this chariot you tell me? Is this wheel the chariot? Then Milinda says, no. So then is the axle the chariot? No. Is it the chassis that is the chariot? No. So is it the yoke that is the chariot? No, says Milinda. Then what is chariot? Is the aggregate of all these wheel, axle, chassis, yoke. Can it be said that the aggregate of all these parts is a chariot? I will give you all these parts individually. Wheel, chassis, yoke, axle. Can all the aggregate of these parts be called chariot? Milinda says, no. All the parts are assembled in a particular way and now you call this chariot. Is there anything separately from the parts? Parts are there, parts are real. But when you assemble the parts in a particular way, it has taken a different name called chariot. Does an entity like chariot really exist apart from the parts? Can the parts, the aggregate assemblage of parts be called a chariot? Certainly it has taken a new name. But there is nothing like chariot as such. Only parts are there. Parts are assembled in a particular manner. It has taken a new shape, that's all. So then, when Nagasena asks Milinda, can the aggregate of parts be called chariot? Milinda was a very intelligent king. He says, no, parts are separate. Parts are there. Parts are assembled in a particular fashion. That's all. Then where is the chariot apart from parts? Yes, you have solved my puzzle. I understood actually. There is nothing like chariot. Similarly, when you say that, there is nothing like Nagasena here. There is only an assemblage of parts. Blood, bone, liver, kidney, pancreas. That's all. So this individuality is a myth. Then Milinda wants to engage him in a deep conversation. Will you come to my court? I would like to have a philosophical discussion with you. Nagasena says, I will enter into a discussion with you if you enter into discussion with me as a scholar. But if you want to enter into discussion with me as a king, then I don't want to come to your court, he said. So what do you mean by that? Milinda asks. If you enter into conversation with me as a king, if I don't agree to your point of view, you will get annoyed and you will get angry and you might even punish me. But if you want to enter into a conversation with me as a scholar, just to prove your argument, I'll put forward my arguments, you put forward your arguments, people are there, witnesses are there, these monks are the witnesses and the people of the Bactria, and these people are there. Let us see who wins. Let us see actually who has the better logic. Okay, you must be ready to accept your defeat in case your logic fails. So the debate continues. Ultimately, Nagasena establishes that this individuality is a myth. In Buddhism, they call it as anatta. This ego sense is a myth. Anatta. Many people understand that Buddhism never spoke about God, Buddhism never spoke about soul. See, there is only one entity, that is consciousness, that is God. That consciousness apparently separated into different pieces of life because of this ego sense. When you know that the ego sense is a myth, when you drop that, you exist as your true nature. You exist as nirvana. You exist as consciousness. Nirvana, sometimes they describe as nothingness, compared to the mind, compared to the present existence, because present existence is only in terms of name and form. When you attain nirvana, you go beyond name and form. So from the present existence, when you compare with the present experience that you have, you experience it as nothing. They named it as emptiness, but it's not emptiness, it is everything in fact. It is subtler than the subtlest. This way we have a positive word here. We call it mukti, we call it God, actually we call it consciousness. It is not actually an emptiness, it is everything. It is even subtler than the space. So when you are in the mind and you understand things only in terms of name and form, and in things which exist in time and space, and when you reach that experience, you experience it as so subtle and you experience it as a kind of non-entity from this perspective. But it doesn't mean that it is empty. It is subtler than even space. From that subtlest of the thing which is called consciousness of God, the whole world of name and form has come into existence. So this psychological structure, namely the mind, is the sukshma vikara. And the physical body actually is the sthula vikara. These two vikaras or modifications have come out of that subtlest of the existence, namely consciousness. Because it is beyond name and form and beyond time and space, it is the infinite. And that infinite we will be able to attain and achieve when you drop this fictitious ego sense. That's why it's a ghost. So when it has sneaked in, how it has sneaked in into the house of God, there is only an aggregate I am saying. To operate this aggregate, sanghata parartatvat, there is a statement in Sankhya, sanghata parartatvat. This sanghata, this aggregate of parts, should exist for something, right? This assembly just cannot exist on its own. Some intelligence principle is there. Somebody wanted it to combine in this particular fashion. That's why the body is formed and the mind is formed. For what? For whose sake it exists? It exists for the sake of soul and consciousness. That is actually the difference between Buddhism and Hinduism. So this soul or consciousness we say Jivatma. Jivatma, is it different from Paramatman? Absolutely no. It's not at all different from Paramatman, but the same Paramatman, that the supreme consciousness, conditioned by time and space, apparently, temporarily, is called a Jivatma. That consciousness apparently got divided into a Jiva. So for this aggregate, there must be some intelligent principle. So there is soul, there is consciousness. So this soul or consciousness only animates this body and mind. Without that, it cannot exist. That's why we say there is soul, there is consciousness. Buddhists, they don't agree. So if you agree that there is a soul, then you ask me the question actually, what is the nature of the soul? That cannot be described because again, it's beyond time and space. Description can happen only in the mind. So I will have to make an attempt to describe that consciousness in terms of time and space with my mind, and you will have to understand it again in your mind, and which is again limited by time and space. So that is actually an useless exercise. But still our Upanishadic sages, they have described it in terms of, paradoxes. They said it moves and it moves not, it's very far, it's very near. All the language, the paradoxical language. What do you mean by when you say that it moves and it moves not? How can that be? The statement is not correct. Okay? It's very far and it's very near. Tad yajati tad na yajati. Tad dure tad vantike. It's very far, it's very near. This contradiction has come because you have made an attempt to describe a thing with an instrument called the mind. That's why the failure to express it in words. The Buddhists, they desisted from that. They said better don't describe it. Better don't attempt to define it something which cannot be defined. Better don't make an attempt to comprehend something which cannot be comprehended. Consciousness cannot be comprehended by the mind. So just keep quiet. Don't describe it. Don't talk about it. So don't talk about only the fictitious, though anatta, only ego that you experience. This ego is unreal. So annihilate the ego and see what happens. That's all. Annihilate the ego, annihilate the desire, and then nirvana. So what is that nirvana? And nobody can explain it to you. You have to get it as an experience. But out of their infinite compassion, after experiencing the truth, rishis of the Upanishads, they made an attempt to describe something which cannot be described. But they say that it is avang manasa gochara. Through word and through intellect, it cannot be reached, it cannot be explained. That also they told. But yet, they made an attempt. And they gave certain definitions of consciousness. It's very subtle, very near, very far. Okay, it is ananta, infinite. It is aprameya. Many adjectives they have used. But none of the adjective really describes what consciousness is. They just made an attempt to give a vague perspective at least. Because when you embark on spiritual sadhana, spiritual practice, you have a goal. What is that? To know God. What is God? You ask me immediately. So I will tell only you do the sadhana and travel the path, and at the end you will experience it. What is God? I cannot explain it. Then you will not be interested in doing sadhana. No, I want to know about the destination, you ask me. Okay? I will ask you to go to Delhi, and you don't know anything about Delhi. I have not heard about anything about Delhi. Will you go? You will not go. Either you should have some work there. And you want to see the place, you have a desire. Only when a city like Delhi exists, then only you can go there. And I don't know anything about Delhi. So if I ask you to go, you don't. Similarly here, I don't know anything about destination and you are asking me to reach the destination. Okay, I will show you the path and I will ask you to walk on the path. You will ask me, why should I walk on the path? I will tell you we will reach the destination. What is the destination? I will tell you that I don't know what is the destination. I don't know anything about the destination. Will you travel the path? You will not. But again, is it possible to know about the destination, namely God? No. Only when you travel the path, you reach the destination, and when you reach it, you will understand what that is. Okay? Because it is an experience, cannot be explained. So no analogy really works here. No analogy really explains what this God realization is all about. So all the great sages and mystics, they could only show us the path. This is the way, this is the path. This is the practice. They have given us the practice. You just practice and you will get the enlightenment. And after getting the enlightenment, you will not have the question, what is enlightenment, what is God? You will not come to me with the question that this is God, this is enlightenment. Now you have known by experience. All the questions will disappear for you. You have no doubt of any kind. Your enlightened means that you have become omniscient. You have become all-knowing. There is nothing more for you to know. You have known yourself. So now, we have in our theology, in Sanatana Dharma, this beautiful understanding of Prakriti. So then what is the problem if this is not there? This ego sense is a myth, ego sense is unreal, it's a pseudo, it's a sham. What is the problem? Why can't I drop it? Why can't I have enlightenment now itself? Why can't I have the experience of consciousness, experience of God? Just like that. I have the wish, I have the longing, but I don't get the experience that easily. Though it is fictitious, unreal, it's anatta. Buddhists say it is anatta, unreal. Ego sense is unreal. Every day when you go to sleep, actually you don't have that. You don't say I in your deep sleep. Where do you go? You go to the infinite, you go to the real nature. You exist as the infinite, but again when you wake up, you become the finite. So this sleep is happening unconsciously, in ignorance. Ultimately, when you are asked to reach enlightenment, when you are asked to strive for enlightenment, you are told to get that infinite nature of your own being, which you experience every day in deep sleep. You don't exist as physical body, you don't exist as mind, but you exist as your infinite nature. There is no suffering of any kind. It is absolute ananda. It is a bliss. It is not contaminated, it is not defiled by pain. A painless experience, an eternal experience, and an immortality. So, why is it so difficult to conquer this ghost, to conquer this ego sense, which has sneaked into this temple of God and is playing the mischief? So, our people have studied the Prakriti mind thoroughly, and they have classified the mind into three kinds: the tamasic mind, rajasic mind, and sattvic mind. Tamasic ego sense, rajasic ego sense, and sattvic ego sense. The characteristics of tamasic ego sense, rajasic ego sense, and sattvic ego sense clearly delineated and beautifully described in Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the 14th chapter, Gunatraya Vibhaga. What are the characteristics of a sattvic individual? What are the characteristics of a tamasic individual? What is the characteristic of a rajasic individual? Let us say your ego sense is predominantly tamasic. This ghost actually is one ghost, but it has three different forms. It can put on the tamasic form, it can put on the rajasic form, it can put on the sattvic form also, this ghost called ego sense. When it puts on the tamasic form in an individual, let us say, the ghost actually appears as in its tamasic form in a particular individual. So what happens, this ghost which has sneaked into the house of God, it doesn't even acknowledge. It has usurped the property of somebody else, but it doesn't even acknowledge. Do you understand? It's a riddle. Okay? It has entered into this being, but it doesn't even acknowledge that I am an usurper to the owner of the property. Who is the owner of this property? His body and mind. Who? God. Okay? I think 2-3 weeks before we discussed this. Okay? We are part of the universe. The universe is created by God. God actually is the owner of the universe. So we being the part of the universe, we also should belong to God only. So God is the owner of the universe. So He owns our body and mind also. Then where this I has come, I am saying. Okay? He is the owner. So property has to go to Him because He is the rightful owner. Because the whole universe belongs to Him. When the whole belongs to Him, how the part belongs to you? Okay, part also should belong to the person who owns the whole, right? So this also should belong to God. But in between, this ghost has entered. Our parents have given us the name and we take it too seriously, that's all. Okay, that we have concretized it. It's only a denomination, it's only for the purpose of convention. It is only for the purpose of convention, but it has become so real for us. So when this ghost puts on its tamasic form, it behaves in one particular way. How it behaves? It has usurped the property of God, but it doesn't acknowledge that. Okay. It doesn't acknowledge, okay. But will it put to you good use? No. How it uses it? It has taken the property of God, but it doesn't even use it for its own advantage. Okay. How? You may say. An individual who is of tamasic disposition, he doesn't even know what is good for him. Pravrittim cha nivrittim cha na jana vidura asuraha. Okay, aprakarasho apravrittischa. No intelligence shines. There will be confused understanding. There will be confused understanding. So when you say that you don't know what is good for you, and your behavior and conduct and actions will be in such a way that you will trouble others with your understanding of life, with your actions, but still you don't bother. You are not even conscious, you are not even aware that my actions, my behavior, my undertakings, they are troubling my own people, the people who surround you, people who are actually your family members. You see so many such people in the society. They are totally irresponsible. Whether my action, whether my behavior actually, is it troubling them or is it making them feel happy? Is it making them feel good about me? No. You're troubling others, but yet you are not mindful. That means you are totally irresponsible. So when this ghost puts on its tamasic form, first, it doesn't acknowledge that it is the usurper. It has taken the property of God, namely the body and mind belong to God. It has taken the property of God, but it doesn't acknowledge that I have taken it from you. It doesn't acknowledge that I am the usurper. It doesn't acknowledge that I want to use your property for some time. Okay, it thinks it is the owner of the property. Okay, it assumes it is as the owner of the property. Whether it uses the property for its own welfare, but it doesn't use it for its own welfare also, for its own good also. So that is the problem when this ghost called ego sense puts up its tamasic form. When it puts up its rajasic form, it will be very ambitious. Rajo ragatmakam vidhi, trishna sanga samudbhavam. That is full of passion driven, full of ambition, full of desire. Okay, it wants to acquire things for itself. It wants to have all the possessions of the world for itself. It wants to serve itself, and others are all secondary, non-entities. I want to live for myself. I want to enjoy it for myself. Does it acknowledge that it is the usurper? Does it acknowledge that it has taken the property of somebody else? No, it doesn't acknowledge to God either. The Rajasic Ahankara is also like that. Only when the ego sense becomes sattvic, when this ghost takes up the form of sattva, when it puts up its sattvic form, then actually it acknowledges, oh Lord, this is not mine. This body and mind are yours. It acknowledges, I have wrongly usurped your property and I will give it back to you. I am not in position to give it back to you all of a sudden because I have my interest here, because you have taken a name, then you have educated yourself, you have acquired some properties, so many things of mine. Okay, this I is not simple today. I have become educated, I have my spouse, I have my children, I have my properties, okay, I have my possession, I have my wants. It becomes all of a sudden, how can you give it back? That is the problem. Okay, let us go back to the question that. So if this ego sense is so fictitious, if it is so unreal, what is the problem in dropping it and experiencing myself as the pure consciousness? What is the problem? Because this ego sense even has not transformed into a sattvika ego sense. So this ghost actually is a rajasic ghost. It has put up its rajasic form. It has put up its tamasic form. When it puts up its sattvic form, it values qualities like kindness. It values qualities like compassion. It values qualities like humility. It values actually virtues like truthfulness, righteousness, non-violence. And then actually it acknowledges to its owner that I am not the real owner of this piece of life. You are the real owner of this piece of life, God. You have made this instrument for your play and you play with your instrument according to your will. My will is not important. It is your will. Then it acknowledges and the surrender begins. Surrender begins. So you will be able to conquer this anatta, this unreality, namely ego sense. But before that, you must transmute it, transform it into a sattvic ego sense. You have to transform the ghost actually from tamasic ghost to actually rajasic ghost, and then it has to become a sattvic ghost, but it's ghost. There is only actually one entity should be there, only God, from where this I has come. Because when the whole universe belongs to Him, the part also should belong to Him. So, that which is His property, He uses it actually in His own way. That's what Sri Ramakrishna says. And he says that you become an instrument in the hands of the Lord. Ami jantro tumi jantri. I am the machine and you are the operator of the machine, and you made the machine for your purposes, for your benefit, and you operate your machine according to your will. Then where is this I? It's fictitious. It's fictitious. Rama said to Hanuman, "Oh Hanuman, you have burned Lanka." Then Hanuman wanted to correct Rama. No, Lord, I have not burned Lanka. Rama was surprised. Rama said, you only have burnt Lanka. That Ravana actually wrapped your tail with clothes, and then actually he soaked it in oil, and then he lighted it up, and then you went and you burned Lanka. And you say, I have not burned. Oh no, oh Lord, I have not burned Lanka. Then who burned? It is Mother Saraswati's Sankalpa, Ravana's Papa and Shapa, and your Pratapa that has burnt Lanka. Okay? It is Mother Saraswati's Sankalpa. It doesn't say that it is my Sankalpa to burn Lanka. I have no will of my own, my Lord. You just see the self-effacing spirit. You just see the self-surrender of Hanuman. The degree of self-surrender that he has achieved. When Rama said, you have burned. No, I have not burned. There is nothing like I in me. It is Mother Saraswati who willed like that. She incited my buddhi like that. This buddhi actually was incited by her. She goaded it her in that way. And Ravana's papa and shapa. Okay, Ravana's sin, and because of the sinful deeds, he had many curses on his head. And so his sin and his curse on his head. And your pratapa, O Rama. This is not my pratapa. Because the whole universe is yours. You are that all-pervading spirit. This is just an instrument. This is your dasa. This is your dasa. And this is your instrument, you use it for your purpose. So your prowess, O Rama, it's not my prowess. So this actually has burnt Lanka. Okay? This burnt. Not I. Absolutely. Sri Ramakrishna also would never use this I and mine. He says I and mine is only ignorance. But how difficult it is to get rid of this fictitious entity you just see. Theoretically it is so simple. But when it comes into practical life, to get rid of this non-entity, fictitious entity, unreal entity, how much of difficulty. You're not prepared, that's all. But logic proves that this is fictitious. Okay? Logic, simply you have proved, right? Whole universe belongs to God, this also must belong to God. So what is God's, you give back to God, that's what I'm saying. That's what spirituality is all about. That's what surrender is all about. What is not yours, you are trying to own by taking a ghost called name. Okay? This name is the ghost. But don't attach such an importance to this ghost. This ghost is playing all the mischief now. All the mischief is because of this ghost. I is the ghost that is troubling us. You have the freedom to drop it at will. You drop and then get enlightened. Is it that simple? Theoretically it is that simple. Maybe in practice it takes time for us. It takes some sadhana to attain to enlightenment because we only are holding it on. No, I want to have my name. Okay. Vivekananda told that Emma Kave, opera singer, you come to India, I will help you with enlightenment. She doesn't understand what is enlightenment. What I need to do for that? Swami said, you have to drop this individuality, that's all. And she said, no, Swami, I am not in a position. Because of that only, because she has got so much of name and fame and recognition as opera singer. I am a good singer, I am a great singer. Society respects me, values me. How can I let go that individuality that is too precious for me? And then Swamiji says, exclaims, individuality. He stresses the word, individuality. Petty individuality, puny individuality. Are you not ashamed to get attached to this bone and flesh? Such a stula vikara, and the mind, you know what kinds of thoughts exist there, particularly in Kali Yuga, in this age. Are you so comfortable with your thoughts? Mind is a kind of garbage bin, right? For most of the people. That is the reason. It is stinking, right? Bad smell, bad odor is coming. That is the problem. You have such a noble thought in your mind, at least you should be comfortable in your mind. Okay? Why you seek meditation, why you go here and there, my mind is troubling me, because the thought is not so good there. If it's all actually pure thought, it's all noble thought, positive thought, strength-giving thought. You should at least feel happy about yourself and your thoughts. But you are not comfortable with your thoughts. It has to be and it has become, for various reasons. You have made it into a garbage bin. So you have to cultivate the mind. So before you aim to drop the mind, you have to purify it. It's easy to drop a pure mind. An impure mind cannot be just dropped. Impure mind gets attached to the body, like a strong adhesive. It can't be just segregated like that. You can separate the mind from the body only when it becomes pure. That's why to acquire this purity only, we are suggested meditation, prayer, repetition of God's name. Because the name and the entity to which the name refers are inseparable, are one and the same. So whenever you utter God's name, have this understanding, have this conviction that you are uttering the name of that power and that force which has created this universe. You are uttering the name of consciousness, the infinite actually. What that Lord is, you cannot really know. But we have the freedom to give a name. You give that name and have the consciousness that you are uttering God's name, the Almighty's name, and then you utter. And that purifies your mind. This impure mind will become pure. The antakarana, inner instrument, will become pure. When it becomes pure, it is easy to meditate, it is easy to see your true glory, consciousness, God, soul. So, why to identify with this Sukshma Vikara and Sthula Vikara? This mind is a Sukshma Vikara, subtle Vikara. And this body is Sthula Vikara. Navadvara Pure Dehi, the Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita. It has 9 orifices, 9 pores. You know what comes out of these 9 pores? Why to be fascinated by this physical body? Why to have such a strong obsession? Okay, for the people of the West, actually, such a strong obsession. The East, actually, it has not been, but now, actually, it has become. We are equally obsessed as the people in the West are. But in our culture, we are always told that body is an inferior modification, Vikara, don't get identified with it. Your real nature is something so profound and grand. Compared to that, it is actually very despicable, very loathsome, very disgusting. But now, problem is, this ghost, as it doesn't know anything about the consciousness, the source from which it has come, so it just gets attached to the body. It doesn't know where to put his head on, where to lay. It wants some hold. It's like a bat, bat. The bat, it hangs upside down to a branch. Like that, this ghost of a mind is also. It is attached to the branch called the body, and now it can't give that up. So where to hold, where to get hooked on. So it needs something to catch on. It can't just exist on its own. Mind is like that. Now it is holding on to the body. So you want to withdraw it from body. Then where actually it will go? It has to go to God. There is no other source. So if you don't know how to meditate on God, if you don't know how to actually send it back, this is the problem. Because it cannot conceive of that. Body it can conceive, mind very easily. But consciousness it is not able to conceive. So when you ask it to withdraw from the body and actually get attached to the consciousness, but it gets confused. It gets confused. So you need to have an idea, slowly, as you keep meditating on the divine, and slowly, the mind understands that it doesn't really exist on its own. It has to go back to its source. So it is not annihilation, it is a merger into the infinite. When it is convinced of that, it is not annihilation or destruction, because nothing seeks self-annihilation in this universe. So this ghost also doesn't seek self-annihilation. So you have to convince the mind, you have to cajole the mind, you have to request the mind. Okay, get destroyed. Why you want to have this form? Go back and merge in your Father, merge in your source, and then actually it's peace for you. Why actually such a trouble for you? And you bring trouble to me also, because me and mind are one and the same. So our troubles will come to an end when this mind is dissolved back into its source. So now you don't know anything about source, but you are asking the mind to get dissolved in that. That's the problem. The mind resists. So as you keep meditating on God, think about God, read His sportive deeds and excellences, read books pertaining to the Lord, scriptures namely, slowly, mind forms a conception of the destination, the objective, the source. And then actually it will be willing to get dissolved, willing to get disappear, to merge into that supreme, to expand into the infinite. And for that only, all the sadhana that we do. The spiritual sadhana is all about exorcism. You have to exorcise this ghost. You have to drive the ghost out of the body, then you are an enlightenment. Then you understand that you neither need the body nor need the mind. You exist by yourself as consciousness. That is our true glory. That is our original existence. Now today actually it is a fictitious existence. So to reach that sublime from this ridiculous existence is the goal. Present is ridiculous, truly ridiculous. Okay, this physical body is truly a ridiculous entity. Mind is also a ridiculous entity. And now we can't help holding on to the ridiculous because we don't know the sublime. We don't know the higher. We don't know the beyond. So for that you will get an understanding and grasp as you keep meditating and doing sadhana. Slowly. Then the spiritual life you will relish. And this sadhana you will relish. And now you just see the society and how actual people describe their success in life only through material possessions, right? Money, name and fame, material possessions. If somebody wants to lead a spiritual life and he's trying to purify the inner instrument, they don't understand. They can't figure it out what his achievement is all about. Okay, without knowing yourself, without knowing who you are in reality, you will never have true peace and happiness. You will never get that real peace or beatitude that you're aspiring and longing for. And ultimately, what is there in front of every one of us? Only death. People will say wise, but they are not really wise. What is there in front of every human being? Is that death is the only thing. That's why you just see old people, they become very nostalgic because they can't look forward. Because forward only in front, only death is there. At least young people think actually death is very far, so they have so many goals. So before death comes, let me achieve all these goals and let me enjoy all those things. You have some hope. For an old man of 80 years, where is the hope? There is no hope in front, he cannot look because it's only death. So he looks back, he becomes nostalgic. So I used to do like that in childhood. As a young man, I did this. Okay, I did this when I was in 30s. I did this when I'm 40s. People used to praise me. People used to talk about me. These are my accomplishments. These are glories. Everything about the past. Everything behind, but can't look forward. Right? Here actually, it's a mystery because I don't know anything about the mystery, so I can't look forward. So this is the thing. We have to embark on sadhana. You must know who you are. Just get rid of this ghost, ego sense, and give the temple back to its owner, the real owner, God. That's all. Very simple theoretically. Yeah. Practice also becomes easy when you are intellectually convinced. So all these discourses are just for an intellectual clarity on as to what the purpose of life. We will stop here. We will meditate for 2 minutes before we disperse.